No, no buzz. A Just Bees book club. Today we're talking Foster by Claire Keegan, a book that I cannot produce right now because back in like early November, I think there was a New York Times article about her writing, and like a week later at my job, I got a call that was just like, "Hey, is it real? Do you really have a copy of that book?" And I was like, "Yeah, we do. I've been meaning to pick it up." And I was asked to transfer it to a different store, and I read it because it was the timing was right. Um, I have talked about. I'm pretty sure I talked about small things like these on this channel before. A book I quite liked and was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. So ever since then, I saw she had a new book out, which Foster is was published 2022, but I guess it was originally published in the U.S. in the New Yorker in 2012 or 2011, as a short story, like an abridged version of it. So this new one is the unabridged, I guess. Foster. It's a slim little, I don't know, 80 page with like large print, generous spacing, and not like large print technically speaking, but like fairly large words. Um, Short story that is really good. I really enjoyed it. I think once I got the transfer request, I was like, I'll just skim through the first few pages, see if I want to. And then I was like, I didn't even have to get to the first few pages. I think within the first page of this very small book with very generously spaced margins and line breaks and stuff. Or not line breaks, but in ooh, I used to be a technical writer. I should remember the term for this. The spacing between the lines, line spacing, I guess. Um, yeah, it was. So what I'm saying is, within the first 50 words, maybe I was like, oh yeah, she writes really good, and I was just immediately like, oh, I need to just tear through this in the next couple of hours, and it genuinely only took me a couple of hours to read. But it's gonna stick with me, I think, a lot longer than I don't know some other things. Um, but yeah, so the story is it's a first person narrative from the perspective of a young girl. I think probably who's like somewhere between like 8 and 12. I don't remember if she's explicitly like if it's explicitly stated. Maybe she's even 6. I can't remember. Um, Sort of following a summer where her mom is about to give birth to another kid, and there's like 5 or 6 kids already. And so the opening action is her dad driving her out to some like distant relatives, and basically they drop her off as a foster kid for these relatives. And there's like openness throughout most of the book about whether or not that she's like going to become their child or if it's just for a summer or what it is. Um, it's a really touching book. There's like uh, I can't I obviously cannot speak to the the accuracy of the sort of Irish dialect that she's capturing. I can say reading it on the page immediately, there was immediately voice. It was given voice in my head in a way that a lot of dialogue does not. Um, I don't tend to listen to characters speak. I tend to approach words as words. But there's something like inimitable about the way she's writing that just is. Yeah, it immediately put a voice into my head, like from again, like the first 15 words. And it's partially, the way she works with words themselves to, literally change letters and stuff like that. But I think it's as much about like the sort of sharp observations that the narrator makes. There's something about like there's a line it's been a few weeks, maybe a month since I read this. There's a line that is like she had watched men speak like this before, where they would rather like kick their boot into the ground, um, than say what they mean. And there's like like an aside in this same opening sort of dialogue between her father and the foster parents, where it's like the father is talking about how great the wheat harvest has been, and the unnamed narrator has already sort of like, I believe already or maybe just after this, talked about like how she thought she was going to go home to do the wheat harvest because they haven't had the opportunity to do it so far. I think it's actually just after this. Uh, but like the narrator sort of, excuse me, the narrator sort of, what is the shit? She talks about how she like isn't really sure why, but she has noticed that her father like sort of compulsively lies about these like really inconsequential things. Like, for instance, that the wheat was like really good this year. I don't know if inconsequential is the word that is used in there, but that's like the feeling she gets. But then later she's talking to the foster mom. I've forgotten both of their names at this point, unfortunately. Um, and mentions that, like, oh yeah, I was expecting to go do the wheat harvest, and she's like, oh, the mom is like, oh, it's a bit late in the season for that, isn't it? And she's like, oh, I'm a child. But I think she said something like, oh yeah, we haven't been able to like hire help because she's pregnant, and um, you know, just times are hard. Because this is, I think, presumably set around the 80s. So the thing I read actually subsequently. We're like right around the Troubles, I believe. And Yeah, there was a thing I read also that mentioned that like one of the few pieces of like outside world news that happens is mention of a hunger strike. So it specifically would have been during the Troubles. Um, but yeah, see, I mean, okay, so here's the thing. I have a fucking terrible memory. So the fact that I'm able to start reconstructing this as I go along is actually, I think a strong point in this book's favor. Because normally I'd be like, there was a thing that happened, and I liked the words. But that's the thing is I really liked the words. Just the so sort of just going off of what I've already said, right? Um, or pivoting back to that in a second. Like there's just like such small things like the farm life and stuff. The the well that is sort of the centerpiece of the action of the book. There's not really action. This is not a plot driven thing. It's just a small slice of summer for this child who um, is in some sense experiencing like a attentive love for the first time in her life, and is learning what it can be like to be somebody who is attended to and cared for, rather than somebody who is just a part of a larger family unit that is struggling, and therefore has to be some sort of instrumentalized in certain ways. Um, and there's reasons given for that in the book, and those reasons are I keep. I feel like very early on in these things was just like I'm just gonna make these a spoiler free. This is never gonna be a spoiler free zone. I'm always just gonna talk about spoilers, and I'm still fucking like doing the fucking dance. But yeah, spoilers. They. I guess I don't. I fucking hate. I fucking hate the whole discourse. Um, it comes out eventually that the foster parents had a son who drowned in this well, and then sort of near the end of the book, there is an incident in the well with the narrator, and that is like the entirety of the action of the book. I guess the plot wraps up with her going home. So she has the summer with these foster parents. She sort of learns about herself and different ways to care for others, and ways of interacting, and then has to go home. And there's I get yeah, there's a big emotional scene actually. I guess right at the end there, with the foster father, in a way that like isn't written such that you're supposed to be bawling or anything, but you definitely could. Um, and yeah, and that's yeah, that's the thing I was trying to get back to. Right? Is God, it's just so beautifully written. There is a this incredible economy of language, which it's like an 80-page book. You would hope so, right? And you really get it. And I wish I could pull some examples, but there's no copies available to me at this point. It's probably going to be out of stock until early next year or something. Would be my guess. Um, but yeah, just a really pleasant read that like is just emotionally very open, and caring in a way that yeah, I think it's gonna stick with me for a while. Yeah, and as always, thanks for not watching.